The Dead Sea. Finally fulfilled biblical prophecy, and Christians are stunned. Something impossible is happening right now in the Middle East. In the most lifeless place on earth, life has returned. The Dead Sea, a body of water so toxic that nothing has survived in it for thousands of years, is no longer completely dead. Fish are swimming. Plants are growing. Fresh water is flowing where only brine existed for millennia. And Christians around the world are asking the same question. Are we watching a 2,500-year-old biblical prophecy come to life before our eyes? What you're about to see isn't speculation. It's documented, photographed, and scientifically verified. And it's changing everything we thought we knew about one of the Bible's most powerful prophecies. The Dead Sea has always held a unique place in human consciousness. Sitting at the lowest elevation on Earth, nearly 1,500 feet below sea level, it's been called by many names throughout history. The Salt Sea, the Sea of the Arabah, and most famously, the Dead Sea. The name fits. With salt levels nearly 10 times higher than ocean water, nothing lives in its depths. No fish, no plants, no aquatic life of any kind. Touch the water to your lips, and the salt burns instantly. Get it in your eyes, and the pain is excruciating. For those who know their Bible, this desolate place carries even deeper significance. This valley is believed to be where God's judgment fell on Sodom and Gomorrah, cities so corrupt that divine fire consumed them completely. Genesis describes sulfur and fire raining from heaven, and to this day, the shores of the Dead Sea are littered with sulfur deposits and the ruins of ancient settlements destroyed by catastrophic fire. For generations of believers, the Dead Sea stood as a permanent reminder. Some judgments are final. Some places remain dead. But what if that understanding was incomplete? What if the Dead Sea's story wasn't meant to end in death? About 15 years ago, something strange began happening along the Dead Sea's coastline. The ground started collapsing. Sinkholes, massive craters that appeared without warning, began swallowing roads, buildings, even entire parking lots. What started as a handful of these dangerous holes soon multiplied into thousands. The Israeli Geological Survey has documented over 6,000 sinkholes around the Dead Sea, with new ones forming almost daily. Scientists quickly identified the cause. The Dead Sea has been shrinking at an alarming rate, dropping more than 3 feet per year. As the water recedes, underground freshwater springs that once flowed into the sea now flow beneath the dry land, dissolving the salt deposits underground and creating massive hollow chambers. When these chambers can no longer support the weight above them, the ground simply gives way. But here's what stunned researchers. When they examined these sinkholes more closely, they found something completely unexpected. In 2011, Israeli photographer and environmentalist Noam Bedayan began documenting the sinkhole phenomenon. What he discovered left scientists speechless. Many of these sinkholes had filled with fresh water, and in that fresh water, against every scientific expectation, life was thriving. Small fish, identified as tiny carp, were swimming in pools directly connected to the Dead Sea. Green algae covered the rocks. Microorganisms flourished. Bedayan's photographs went viral. Here was visual proof of life emerging in a place where life should be absolutely impossible. Biologists studied the phenomenon and found that in these localized areas, the mixing of fresh water with the hypersaline Dead Sea water had created pockets where the salt concentration dropped just enough to allow certain hardy species to survive. But even with this explanation, questions remained. Why now? After thousands of years of absolute lifelessness, why is life suddenly appearing in the Dead Sea? And why does this development sound so remarkably similar to something written in the Bible over 2 millennia ago? In the book of Ezekiel, chapters 47 and 48, the prophet describes a vision he received while in exile in Babylon around 571 BC. In this vision, he is shown a future temple in Jerusalem. And from underneath the threshold of this temple, he sees water beginning to flow. The water flows eastward, down from Jerusalem toward the Jordan Valley. As Ezekiel follows this river in his vision, it grows deeper and wider until it becomes a mighty flow. And this river flows directly into what he calls the sea, understood by scholars to be the Dead Sea. Then Ezekiel records something extraordinary. Listen to his exact words from Ezekiel 47, verses 8 through 10. This water flows toward the eastern region, goes down into the valley, and enters the sea. When it reaches the sea, its waters are healed. Wherever the river flows, everything will live. There will be large numbers of fish, because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shore. From En-Gedi to En-Eglaim, there will be places for spreading nets. For centuries, biblical scholars debated what this passage meant. Most concluded it was purely symbolic, a beautiful metaphor for spiritual renewal, not a literal prediction about the actual Dead Sea. But today, that interpretation is being challenged. Because what Ezekiel described is precisely what we're now seeing begin to unfold. Notice the specific details in Ezekiel's prophecy. He mentions En-Gedi by name, an oasis on the western shore of the Dead Sea. Today, En-Gedi is one of the most beautiful nature reserves in Israel, a stunning contrast of green vegetation against the barren desert. Ezekiel says fishermen will spread their nets from En-Gedi to En-Eglaim. He's describing specific geographic locations. He's talking about actual fish in actual water. And he's describing a transformation of the Dead Sea from salt water to fresh water, from death to life. The prophet Zechariah adds another layer to this prophecy. In Zechariah 14:8, written around 520 BC, he describes a future day when living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half to the eastern sea and half to the western sea. The eastern sea is the Dead Sea. The western sea is the Mediterranean. And living water in biblical language means fresh, life-giving water. Two prophets, writing independently, both describing fresh water flowing from Jerusalem to heal the Dead Sea and fill it with life. For 2,500 years, this seemed impossible. But in 2011, when those first photographs emerged of fish swimming in Dead Sea sinkholes, something shifted in the minds of believers around the world. What if the prophecy was always meant to be literal? And what if we're living in the generation that will see it fulfilled? The scientific community continues to study these phenomena, looking for natural explanations. And there are natural processes at work: the shrinking sea level, the underground freshwater flows, the chemical changes in localized areas. But even scientists acknowledge the timing is remarkable. Israel and Jordan have recently launched ambitious projects to save the Dead Sea, including plans for a massive pipeline that would bring water from the Red Sea to replenish the shrinking sea. These human efforts, combined with the natural emergence of freshwater springs, are creating conditions that could, theoretically, lead to exactly what Ezekiel described. Yet the question remains, is this just remarkable coincidence? Or are we watching the hand of God moving in real time? For those of us who believe in the authority of Scripture, this development carries profound implications. The Dead Sea has stood for thousands of years as a symbol of divine judgment, a permanent testament to what happens when humanity rejects God completely. Sodom and Gomorrah became a byword for sin and destruction, and the lifeless sea that remained seemed to seal that judgment forever. But if the Dead Sea is being healed, if life is returning to this place of death, what does that tell us? It tells us that God's final word is never judgment. It's always redemption. It tells us that nothing is beyond His power to restore, no place too dead, no situation too hopeless, no life too broken. The Dead Sea becoming alive is a living parable of resurrection itself. It's the same message that echoes through all of Scripture, that God takes what is dead and makes it live again. So where does this leave us? Are we truly watching biblical prophecy fulfilled? Here are the facts. The Dead Sea is changing. Fresh water is flowing. Life has returned to a place that was completely lifeless for thousands of years. And all of this is happening in the exact location, in the exact manner, described by prophets 2,500 years ago. Skeptics will always find reasons to doubt. They'll point to natural explanations and call it coincidence. And perhaps they're right. Perhaps it is just geology and hydrology following their natural course. But for Christians who have read Ezekiel 47, who have prayed for the fulfillment of God's promises, who have longed to see the Bible's prophecies come to pass, what's happening at the Dead Sea is nothing short of stunning. We may not be seeing the complete fulfillment yet. Ezekiel's vision describes a mighty river, not just underground springs. He describes the entire sea being healed, not just pockets within sinkholes. The full realization may still lie ahead, but the process has begun. The impossible has become possible, and the sea once called dead is stirring with life. If God can bring life to the Dead Sea, He can bring life to anything, to any heart, to any situation, to any person who feels beyond hope. The Dead Sea's transformation isn't just about geography or prophecy. It's about the character of the God we serve, a God who specializes in resurrection, who makes streams flow in the desert, who brings beauty from ashes and life from death. The prophecy is awakening. The waters are stirring, and Christians around the world are watching in wonder. Because if this ancient promise is coming true, what other promises might be next?